You're in the business of token sales. Of course, you emphasize doing it by the book. In your view, is the SEC applying securities law correctly here?
Yeah, it's a really complicated question, and what you'll always hear whenever you talk to experts about this is that it is a facts and circumstances-based analysis. These are not cut and dried black and white cases every time. You have to look at the facts and the circumstances surrounding what they're talking about. Here, the SEC is mostly talking about whether or not Kik violated securities laws in the 2017 sale of Kin. There's a lot of complicated facts here, but what I think is more interesting is that this is signaling that the SEC has gotten really comfortable with their understanding of the space. They initially started off by not doing much at all, and they started enforcing clear fraud cases. They moved on to small non-fraud cases, and this is really the first large non-fraud case that the SEC is pursuing. That's really interesting. It indicates that they feel very confident about how they view the space.
So, Stephen, when you look at what the SEC has done and how they are sort of starting to move into this space a little bit more, and you look at the argument that Kik has made, as well as other folks like Fred Wilson have made, that this shouldn't necessarily be regulated by the SEC, how do you define the threshold between what essentially accounts for, or what should account for, a security versus what's just simply a token?
Well, the law is fairly well established, and it's been in place since, well, at least since the Hyde case in 1947. An investment contract is an investment of money in a common enterprise with the expectation of profits from the entrepreneurial and managerial efforts of another. It's a principles-based regime in the United States, and I agree that this is a facts and circumstances analysis. I'm not sure that people who say that they want regulatory clarity from the SEC in this space really want the SEC to be providing more regulations. Perhaps the flexibility that we have with the current regime is actually better.
Yeah, talk to us about the so-called clarity, potentially, Andy, we will get from this, and what the ripple effects might be. Are there other potentially smaller ICOs that have been out there, less in the limelight because they have less prominent backers, such as a Fred Wilson, but that could be affected and could have done as an ICO in a similar mechanism?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a unique circumstance surrounding this case is that it's playing out in public. Kik published their response to the SEC's original Wells notice indicating that they were investigating seriously, and they published that publicly. After that, the SEC came out and sued them publicly, and that means that we're going to see clarity on this issue publicly, and that's really the first time. To Stephen's point, there is a lot of flexibility now, and so I think that a lot of issuers have stayed comfortable by virtue of that flexibility. The ensuing judgment and what ends up happening could be good or could be bad for the industry. It's really hard to say right now which way the courts will come down on this, but I do think a lot of token issuers are looking at this right now, realizing that this is a critical moment where the results of this case are going to define a lot of what happens going forward and to projects that have already raised.
Stephen, the official line from Kik and its backers is that this is about decentralization and innovation and building an ecosystem, people using Kin. The SEC says this was about bailing out a failing company. Could both be true theoretically?
Absolutely. But what's particularly interesting to me about this lawsuit is it allows you to basically pull back the covers on how the SEC works, how an investigation operates. This lawsuit is something that followed basically a year and a half of investigation that involved over $5 million of fees. There were subpoenas. The SEC already has all of the documents. They took testimony. They know what Kik's position is because of Kik's Wells response. And if I may, they have quotes from emails that say things like this. The whole point is to make our legal department happy, not the users who are actually investors and probably could care less if they got a sticker pack for their $10,000 investment into Kin. I mean, I think if you read this complaint, I actually wondered if the SEC lawyers laughed as they wrote part of this because the facts are bad. Now, I think if you're on the other side, you're going to say those facts are irrelevant. What you have to look at is the actual legal framework.
So, Andy, Kin and Kik, I mean, this seems like sort of the extreme end of sort of this debate. Now, I'm wondering whether there is already a sense among maybe folks who are looking to do an ICO, or at least have sort of entertained the possibility, whether this has sort of put a chill on that until this case is resolved.
I don't think so. I think most issuers are looking at this the same way they have been for the past couple of years. And the good ones have looked at it and said, how can we run this token sale compliantly and exercise the most caution we possibly can? people, to Stephen's point earlier, agree that the law is actually pretty well trod on a lot of these issues around running the token sale itself. And so people have comfort with running those token sales as offerings of securities. At the same time, there are a lot of issuers that ran token sales in more questionable ways over the past couple of years that have been sitting probably in discussions with the SEC for the past year and a half saying, over and over again on advice of counsel, I decline to answer that question, trying to push these questions off. And that's not a position anyone wants to be in. So if anything, I don't think it's chilled the idea of a token sale. What it has done is just made it even more evident that you really need to be careful and be in absolute compliance when you're doing one of these offerings.
And Andy, of course, CoinList helps perhaps bring that transparency to what are the decent ICOs that are out there. How many are coming to you at the moment? Again, we felt that it completely fell off a cliff post the 2017, 2018 hiatus, massive rush into ICOs, and then suddenly the dearth that we had after the sell-off. Are you seeing good quality companies coming through? How many, for example, are you likely to see, say, in America in the next 12 months?
Yeah, we certainly are seeing a lot come through. Not as many as there were in 2017 or early 2018, but actually roughly the same number of high-quality projects. What we saw was that at the end of 2018, there was a big drop-off in the ICO market around the time that the whole crypto market crashed. And so a lot of people canceled or delayed sales. But what we're seeing now in 2019 is that all of those high-quality projects are coming back to run token sales again. The bottom part of the market has dropped out. Those bad issuers that were running unregistered offerings left and right, they're not coming back. And so those are gone. So there are fewer token sales in total, but the number of high quality issuances we see is roughly the same as before. I would expect dozens of high quality issuances in the remainder of calendar year 2019.
Andy, very quickly, critics would say that current regulations in the SEC are stifling innovation in this space. From your perspective, under current law, is innovation still possible?
I think innovation is possible, but it is challenging. What is not challenging to me is how to run a compliant token sale at the very beginning. Where the questions exist at this point in the space is what happens later on, after the offering. When do these tokens become non-securities? When can you actually transact them freely? And so that's the part that's hardest right now. I don't think the stifling of innovation is happening around the token sale itself. It's hard. The Kin case will definitely introduce some clarity, and it will be interesting to see which way it goes.